The stroller she pushed was bright yellow. I remember that first. It had tiny suns printed all over the fabric, and the baby inside was asleep, mouth hanging open like he hadn't a care in the world. Neither did she, apparently, until she saw me. I was standing behind a row of overpriced massage chairs in the middle of that godforsaken mall, clutching a stupid microwave box. She didn't notice right away. She was by the smoothie stand, ordering something with chia seeds. I could tell because I heard her say it, "Extra chia, please." Like she'd never screamed at me for buying the wrong almond milk 2 years ago. I should have walked away. Any sane person would have turned around, headed back to their car, driven home to their sad apartment, and pretended they never saw her. But instead, I stared. I watched her laugh at something the teenager behind the counter said. I watched her check her phone. I watched her bounce that stroller gently when the baby stirred. And then it happened. She turned, her head tilted first, casual, like she was just scanning the crowd. Then her eyes caught mine and everything shifted. I wish I could describe it properly. The way her lips stopped moving mid-sentence. The way the color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might actually faint right there next to the orange Julius. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I felt like one. My hoodie was damp from the rain outside. I hadn't shaved in a week, maybe 2. My left shoe was untied. Meanwhile, she looked like something straight out of a lifestyle blog. Wavy hair perfectly arranged. Oversized cardigan that probably cost more than my rent. A smile that had just been real, now twitching into something that looked like panic. I hadn't seen Mallory in 748 days. Yeah, I counted. Every single one of them. And there she was, holding the baby she made with him. With Curtis. She said something. I couldn't hear it over the ringing in my ears. It might have been Luke, or oh my God, or maybe just a breath caught in her throat. But I knew exactly what she was thinking. What is he doing here? I wanted to laugh. What was I doing there? That mall had been our escape on rainy Sundays when we were still us. The frozen yogurt place was still there, where she used to beg for double mocha every single time. I remember the exact corner where she once kissed me between the escalators, whispering against my lips, "Promise we'll never fall apart." She broke that promise on a Wednesday afternoon in March. She hadn't texted, hadn't called, just disappeared, leaving behind a house with 2 toothbrushes still in the cup. Her wedding ring on the coffee table like some kind of period at the end of a sentence I never saw coming. And a voicemail that began with "Please, don't be mad" and ended with "I'm not coming back." And yet, here she was, alive, blooming, complete with his child. I didn't approach. Not yet. I watched her pick up her drink. Watched her bounce the baby gently when he started to fuss. Watched her glance around nervously like I might vanish if she blinked hard enough. But I didn't vanish. I stepped forward. She saw me move and her body stiffened like I'd drawn a weapon. The baby stirred in his stroller, making those soft gurgling sounds that babies make. The wheels squeaked as she backed up an inch, then another. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. Not some clever comeback I'd rehearsed in the shower for 2 years. Not some biting insult designed to cut her down. Just a single question, soft and flat. "Is that him?" Her eyes glistened. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because I already knew. She didn't answer me. Instead, she looked away. Suddenly fascinated with a nearby rack of vanilla-scented candles like they held the secrets of the universe. The baby gurgled, loud and oblivious and happy, while she pretended my question hadn't sliced through 2 years of silence between us like a knife through paper. I took another step forward. Not because I wanted to intimidate her. I didn't. I just wanted her to look at me properly. Like a human being. Not a mistake. Not a face she'd outgrown. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her smoothie cup. She glanced down at the baby. Her baby. As if hoping he'd magically distract me from the conversation we both knew was coming. But he didn't. My eyes were locked on her, and my chest felt tight, like I'd swallowed gravel. I repeated the question, slower this time, like maybe she didn't hear it the first time. Is that his kid? I motioned slightly toward the stroller, not trusting myself to say his name out loud. Curtis. Even now, even after all this time, those syllables tasted bitter on my tongue. She gave the faintest nod, like she was scared to move her head any more than that. I let out this ridiculous laugh. It wasn't a real laugh, more like something cracked inside me and spilled out through my mouth. A couple walking by turned their heads. Mallory shrank a little into her oversized sweater, clearly wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "So," I said, my voice bouncing off the tiled walls of the food court. "You did it. You actually built a family with him." I looked down at the kid again. He had her eyes, huge and blue and a little too knowing for someone so small. But there was something else there, something that made my stomach twist into knots. Guess I was just a warm-up act. "Please don't," she said finally, her voice thin and warned, like an apology that had aged poorly in a drawer somewhere. She still didn't call me by name. Not Luke, not even you. Just don't. Like I was a threat, or worse, an echo of something she'd rather forget. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something small and meaningless, like a phone charger or a food tray. Instead, I stared at her and asked the question that had been eating me alive for 748 days. "Why'd you do it like that? Just leave. No goodbye, no warning. You didn't even tell me in person." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked genuinely speechless, like someone had asked her to solve calculus in her head. I'd imagined this moment so many times. In the shower, in traffic, lying awake on my deflated air mattress at 3 in the morning. I drafted 1,000 perfect lines, crafted brilliant speeches that would make her understand exactly what she'd done to me. But none of them had prepared me for this awkward, suffocating silence. My chest ached. I realized I hadn't taken a breath in almost 20 seconds. "I didn't think you'd let me go," she finally whispered. So quietly, I almost missed it. "You always clung to things." She gestured vaguely, like I was a bad habit she'd finally managed to kick. I wanted to say something clever, something final and devastating that would haunt her for the next 2 years the way her voicemail had haunted me. But what came out was a pitiful whisper. "I was your husband." And she flinched. Hard. That word, husband, hit her like a physical slap. She looked down again, her hand automatically rocking the stroller back and forth in that universal parent rhythm. The kid began to fuss, not crying yet, just fidgeting like he could sense the tension building around him. And still, she didn't say my name. "I would have done anything for you," I said, and I could hear my voice starting to crack around the edges. "I stayed when you got depressed and wouldn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. I cleaned out your mom's garage when no one else would help. I drove you to job interviews even when I knew you were already messaging him behind my back." Made her eyes shoot up. Sharp. Defensive. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I asked, because I remembered everything. Every late night, every suspicious phone call, every time she came home smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I remember the night you came home smelling like his aftershave. I asked if you'd switched shampoos. You said it was lavender and rolled your eyes at me like I was crazy. I didn't want to hurt you. You still did. She exhaled sharply, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But of course she didn't. Mallory had always been good at keeping it together in public. Me? I was the guy who once sobbed in a Walgreens parking lot because they were out of those orange-flavored cough drops she liked when she was sick. I was the guy who left 17 voicemails begging her to come home while she was already living with him. Now I stood here in this mall, holding a box with a microwave I didn't even want, talking to the woman who used to say forever in her sleep, while her new child tried to shove a plastic giraffe into his mouth. And then she said the worst thing she possibly could have. "You look different." That was it. Not "I'm sorry." Not "you didn't deserve what I did." Just different. Like I was a hairstyle she'd grown tired of. Like I was furniture she'd rearranged. I wanted to disappear. So I did something I didn't plan. I turned around and walked away. Not dramatically. Not with some epic movie line or a middle finger in the air. I just left, box in hand, shoulders hunched, walking past the candle display and the pretzel stand, out through those automatic doors into the gray afternoon drizzle. And as they slid shut behind me, I realized something strange. For the first time since she left, she was the one watching me walk away. I thought that would be the end of it. Just walking away. Letting those glass doors slide shut behind me like curtains after the most humiliating performance of my life. I didn't expect anything else from her. I certainly didn't expect the sound of quick footsteps splashing through puddles behind me. Luke, wait. It was the first time she'd said my name in over 2 years. I froze under the mall awning, gripping that microwave box tighter, like it might somehow keep me grounded to reality. I didn't turn around. She caught up, breathless, one hand shielding her eyes from the rain, the other pressing her cardigan closed over her chest. The stroller, thank God, was still inside. I think she'd left it with one of those kiosk workers. Or maybe she'd just abandoned it. I don't know. I couldn't stop staring at the parking lot, at the gray sky above it, at the thin threads of steam rising from the wet pavement. She stood beside me in silence for what felt like an eternity. Her breathing was the only sound between us. "You didn't look okay," she said quietly, like that somehow made her the hero of this scene. Like following me out into the drizzle meant something more than 2 years of absolute nothing. "I just wanted to check on you." "You wanted to check on me?" I said, finally turning to face her. "After you erased me from your life like I was a typo? That's rich." "That's not what I did." "You ghosted me, Mallory. I left you a 20-page letter trying to understand what went wrong. You left me a voicemail with bullet points." She flinched. I almost felt bad. Almost. Her hair was damp now, her mascara slightly smudged under one eye. For a moment, she didn't look like the polished Instagram version of herself. She looked like someone caught in the act of remembering everything she'd tried so hard to forget. And I realized, maybe she wasn't here for me. Maybe she was here for her own guilt. "I couldn't face you," she said finally, her voice almost lost to the wind. "You would have talked me out of it." That hit harder than I expected. Harder than the voicemail. Harder than coming home to an empty house. "You're damn right I would have," I said, my voice cracking at the edges. "Because I believed in us. Because I thought you were just tired or confused or going through something. I didn't think you were building a whole other life with someone who drinks his coffee out of mason jars and thinks flannel is a personality trait." She laughed then, a tiny, real laugh that made me feel sick. "You still do that thing," she said, wiping under her eye. "What thing?" "Make jokes when you're breaking." And just like that, I hated her again. Not in the dramatic, movie-ending way. It was quieter than that. Like hating someone for knowing you too well after they've stopped deserving to. I turned back toward the parking lot, the wind pushing drizzle into my face. My hoodie was soaked through. "Why did you really come out here?" I asked without looking at her. "You wanted to make sure I'm not going to throw myself into traffic? Or just check if I still wear the same sad shoes?" She didn't answer at first. I almost thought she'd finally walk away, go back to her perfect little family tableau inside. But then, quietly, she said something that stopped my heart. "I had a dream last month. You were standing at the end of a dock. You didn't look at me. You just walked into the lake and disappeared. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say. For a few seconds, I just stood there blinking away the rain, unsure if the wetness on my cheeks was just the weather or something else entirely. "Why do you care now?" I asked. "Because you mattered. You still matter. Just not in the way you want to." That was worse than a slap. Worse than the letter she never wrote. Worse than every silence she'd gifted me over the last 748 days. I finally looked at her. Really looked at her. "Well, Mallory," I said softly, "you don't get to decide how much I matter anymore." And then I walked away. This time, she didn't follow. I could feel it in the air. The shift. The resignation. Maybe she finally understood that you can't circle back after carving someone out of your life with surgical precision. You don't get to mourn what you murdered slowly. I reached my car, put the microwave in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel with my hands trembling. In the rearview mirror, I could still see her standing there in the rain, but she didn't move toward the mall. She just watched me drive away. I thought that would be it. A final scene. Curtains down, her standing under that leaking mall awning, while I drove away with the saddest microwave in North America beside me. But this story, this fucking story, refuses to end where I need it to. I learned that the hard way 3 days later when I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No proper envelope. Just a folded piece of paper shoved inside a torn greeting card sleeve with cartoon raccoons on the front. It looked like it had been written in a rush, the pen barely keeping up with her thoughts. But the handwriting was familiar. Slanted. Sharp. Dada. Mallory's. And across the top, scrawled above the first sentence, were 5 words I wish I'd never read. You don't know the half? I stared at those words for a long time, sitting on my unmade bed, the letter heavy in my hands like it was made of lead instead of paper. The microwave still wasn't unpacked. I hadn't eaten anything except dry cereal since the mall encounter. And now she was writing me cryptic notes like this was some sort of treasure hunt, or a trap. The first line made my stomach drop into my shoes. Curtis was never supposed to be permanent. What was that supposed to mean? A fling. A rebound. The father of her child was temporary? She went on. Said she didn't mean to get pregnant. That Curtis had pushed for the baby after she told him. That after the child was born, things weren't what she thought they'd be. His charm, the late-night conversations, the energy that had pulled her away from our marriage, it all fizzled once real life set in. She talked about how he changed, how he started drinking more than she remembered, how he stopped listening when she talked, how he once vanished for 2 days straight and came back with a black eye and no explanation that made sense. But then came the part that made me sit up so fast I nearly fell off the bed. I've never told anyone this, but when I left you, I was already 3 months pregnant, and I wasn't sure it was his. My hands started shaking so hard the paper crackled. I had to set it down and walk away. I paced my tiny apartment like a trapped animal, running calculations in my head that I didn't want to be running. 3 months? 3 months? That would mean, that timeline would mean, no. No, 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 no. That couldn't be right. That would mean there was a real chance, a real possibility. I went back to the letter. Curtis didn't ask questions when I told him I might be pregnant. He wanted the idea of a child more than the truth about where it came from. He said if we didn't know for sure, we'd just say it was his, and I was too ashamed to stop him. I wanted to bury it. I convinced myself it was his, and maybe it is, but I don't know. And now, I can't stop wondering. I dropped the letter. Just let it fall to the floor while I sat down hard, staring at my refrigerator like it might have answers written on it in magnetic letters. My mind was buzzing with half-formed thoughts, none of them helpful. I remembered the baby from the mall. His eyes. Those same deep blue eyes I used to see in the mirror when I actually looked at myself properly. This wasn't just about her leaving me anymore. This wasn't just about being replaced by a guy who probably owned more cardigans than most women. This was about a child. Maybe, just maybe, my child. I picked up the letter again with trembling fingers. The rest of it was a jumbled mess of regrets and guilt. Some line about how she sometimes wondered what would have happened if she'd told me sooner. A closing that said, I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know. Deserved to know. I wanted to scream. I deserved a hell of a lot more than this torn-up confessional stuffed in a dollar store raccoon cart. But still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That baby, that stroller, that gummy smile, those eyes. What if I'd walked right past my son? What if Mallory didn't just walk away from me? What if she took my child with her? I didn't sleep that night. Not a single minute. I sat on the edge of my bed in the same clothes I'd worn to the mall, rereading her letter until the words lost all meaning. He might be yours, That line looped in my head like a song I didn't ask for. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was something much deeper and more terrifying. I might have lost a child I never knew I had. And worse, he might have been sleeping under another man's roof for the last 2 years, calling him dad. By sunrise, I was pacing my hallway like a lunatic. I pulled out my old laptop, the one with food crumbs under the keys and stickers from when Mallory thought she wanted to start a blog, and opened a new browser tab. Paternity test without mother's consent. That search led me down a dark rabbit hole. Forums full of men like me. Ghost dads. Maybe dads. Ex-husbands buried under someone else's lie. Most of them said the same thing. Unless you have legal rights, don't expect cooperation. And don't expect the truth. But I wasn't looking for cooperation anymore. I was looking for closure. I hadn't spoken to Mallory since she sent the letter. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask her how long she'd planned to keep this information hidden. Was she going to wait until he turned 18? Or maybe just never tell me at all? But deep down, I knew why she'd sent the letter. It wasn't for me. It was to wipe her slate clean. To clear her conscience without facing any of the consequences. I opened my phone. Scrolled through old messages until I found the number I used to have memorized. Her number. I hadn't dialed it since the divorce papers were signed, but now my thumb hovered over it. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't trust what mine would sound like. So I sent a single text. We need to talk, face to face. Please don't bring him. I stared at the typing bubble that came and went. Came and went. Then, nothing. No reply. I waited 5 minutes. 10. I tossed the phone across the couch and buried my face in my hands. It rang 20 minutes later. Her voice was quiet. Flat. Like she was trying not to wake someone else. I'll meet you, she said. Tomorrow, but only for 10 minutes. This doesn't change anything. But it already had. The next day, we met at a park bench just outside the neighborhood where we used to live. Neutral territory. She wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She looked tired. Her hair wasn't done perfectly, and she had a small stain on her sleeve. It was the first time in years she'd looked imperfect. Strangely, that made her feel real again. I got right to it. I want a test. She didn't answer at first. She just picked at a loose thread on her sleeve and said, I knew you'd say that. So, I waited. What do you want me to do, Luke? Just take him to a lab and tell Curtis what? Surprise? The kid might not be yours. Curtis doesn't matter right now. I do. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I snapped. Louder than I meant to. A jogger looked over at us. I lowered my voice. I spent 2 years grieving a woman who never even buried me properly. And now you're telling me I might have missed my own son's first steps? His first words? His first everything? Stop it. Why? Because it hurts. Good. She looked away. Her hand trembled slightly, and I could tell she wanted to cry. But again, she didn't. I always hated that about her. That ability to wall off everything emotional. To blink once, smile tightly, and pretend the ground wasn't crumbling beneath her feet. I didn't want to destroy anyone's life, she said quietly. You already did. Silence. The kind that feels like a held breath. Then, just when I thought the conversation was over, she pulled something from her coat pocket. A photo. A small Polaroid of the boy. Cedar. Sitting in a sandbox with a plastic dinosaur in one hand. He was looking up at someone just outside the frame, mid-laugh. His hair was a mess. His cheeks were full and round. And those eyes. Tell me they're not yours, she said. And for the first time, her voice cracked completely. I took the photo, stared at it for a long time, and felt something break inside me that I didn't even know was still whole. Not the grief. Not the anger. Something worse. The terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, I still had something left to fight for. Do the test, I said. And then I got up and walked away before I lost whatever was left of me. The waiting nearly killed me. It took 12 days, 12 long, bone-cracking, nerve-twisting days to get the results. During that time, I couldn't focus on anything. Couldn't work. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't even sit still long enough to finish a sandwich. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boy's face. His wide eyes. His round cheeks. His laugh that I'd only heard once, from a distance, in a mall food court. I kept asking myself questions that no one could answer. Would he like dinosaurs because I did at his age? Did he sleep on his side like me? Did he cry at loud noises the way I used to? Did he even know who I was? When the envelope finally came, I just stared at it for a full hour. It was plain, white, and impossibly light. I don't know why I expected it to weigh more. Maybe because it held the future in it, or at least a version of the future I'd quietly built in my mind over the past 2 weeks. The moment I opened it, I knew it would change something fundamental. I just didn't know which part of me would be left standing after. The results were positive. 99.9% probability of paternity. He was mine. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I'd break down or laugh hysterically or throw something across the room. But I didn't. I just sat there on my kitchen floor, holding a truth I'd never asked for, wondering how long she'd known. How long she'd lived in our house, slept in our bed, pregnant with my child, keeping it to herself like some kind of secret weapon. I called her. She didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. So I drove to her place. Curtis opened the door, and he didn't look surprised. That's what hit me first. He looked resigned, like he'd been expecting this moment to arrive like a train he couldn't stop. His eyes were duller than the last time I'd seen him. Less smug. More worn out. His jaw was tight, his hair messy. Like fatherhood hadn't been the romantic Instagram dream he'd probably imagined. "She's not here," he said flatly. "Then you and I are going to talk," I replied. He didn't move, just leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. "I know," he said. I blinked. "You know what?" "That he's yours," he said without even flinching. "I've always known." The silence after that was volcanic. Something inside me snapped. Not violently, just permanently. Like a door closing for good. I couldn't understand what he was saying. I needed him to repeat it, to explain it, to admit he was lying. But he didn't. He just kept talking like we were discussing the weather. "She told me before he was born, said it might not be mine. But I didn't care. I told her I'd raise him anyway. That if he looked like you, I'd deal with it. You were irrelevant to me." I stepped forward, my fists trembling. "Irrelevant? You mean me? The biological father? You think biology makes you a dad?" he snapped. "Where were you when he had a fever at 3 a.m? Where were you when he couldn't sleep unless someone sang to him? You think you can just walk in now and rewrite what's already been written? You stole him. She gave him to me." Those words hit like ice water in my lungs. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. Couldn't stand still. He wasn't raising my child by accident. He'd taken him with full knowledge of what he was doing. And she had let him. "You could have told me," I said, my voice breaking like a 13-year-old's. "You both could have. We didn't owe you anything," he cut in coldly. "She left. You weren't part of the picture anymore." "But I should have been," I whispered. Curtis looked me dead in the eye and said something I'll never forget. "Then maybe you should have fought harder before she walked out the door." I turned and left. I don't remember walking back to my car. I don't remember driving home. I just remember the realization that the two of them had built a life on top of a lie and sealed me out of it like I was the threat. But now I had the truth, and the truth had weight. I wasn't just the ex-husband anymore. I was someone's father, and I had a decision to make. I thought knowing the truth would give me strength. Like the DNA results would unlock some kind of righteous momentum inside me. I thought I'd print them out, staple them to some legal documents, march into court like a man with purpose. But the truth doesn't come with instructions. It comes with weight, with fear, with a hollow kind of ache that makes you question if you even deserve what you've just uncovered. I didn't file anything. Not yet. Instead, I sat on that piece of paper like it was radioactive, and every time I thought about making a move, my brain dragged me back to the same terrifying question. What if he doesn't want to know me? Mallory hadn't called me since the park bench meeting. Curtis clearly wanted me erased from the planet. And the kid, the actual child in the middle of this mess, he didn't even know I existed. That thought haunted me more than anything else. My son was growing up thinking someone else was his dad, while I sat on the sidelines chewing my own heart into pieces. And yeah, I know how pathetic that sounds. I hate it too. But one morning, 3 weeks after that bench conversation, I made a decision. Maybe not the right one, definitely not the strong one, but the only one I could live with. I wrote a letter, a real one, handwritten no raccoons, no typing, just me, and ink, and every ounce of nerve I had left. It wasn't dramatic, no threats, no legal jargon, just honesty. I told her I wasn't coming to ruin anything. I wasn't trying to steal her child or destroy her relationship. I just wanted to meet him. One time. No expectations. No pressure. Just a conversation. A moment. A window. She replied 2 days later. One line. Saturday, 11 a.m., Marlowe Park. Come alone. The minute I pulled into that parking lot, I felt like I was trespassing in my own dream. The sun was out, mocking me with its cheerfulness. Families dotted the grass everywhere. Kids on swings. Parents with coffee cups and forced smiles. Normal people living normal lives. I parked far from the playground and walked in slow, unsure steps, scanning faces like I was looking for a ghost. And then I saw them. Mallory sat under a tree, her knees pulled up to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. She looked fragile, breakable. Next to her, in the grass, sat a boy with a red toy truck in one hand and a juice box in the other. Cedar, my son. He didn't look up when I approached. Mallory did. No wave, no smile. Just a shallow nod like I was the mailman or something equally unremarkable. I crouched beside them, not too close. Heart pounding in places I didn't know had rhythm. "Hi," I said softly. Cedar looked up. Big blue eyes. My eyes. The same ones I'd been staring at in mirrors my whole life. "Who's that?" he asked Mallory. She hesitated. I watched her struggle with the words. "That's an old friend." "Friend of yours?" he asked her. Then, looking at me directly for the first time, added, "You don't look like a friend. You look like a stranger." That word hit me in the throat like a punch. Stranger. That's what I was. A stranger to my own blood. I forced a weak smile. "Well, yeah, I guess I do. Do you have trucks?" he asked, pointing to the red one in his hand. "I used to," I replied. "Not as cool as that one, though." He inspected me for exactly 3 seconds. Then he went back to his juice box like I was furniture. Mallory didn't speak. Neither did I. We just sat there like 3 broken people arranged in a shape that nobody wanted to claim. I watched him play for 20 minutes. Asked him 2 questions. Got 3 answers that didn't really connect to anything I'd said. At one point, he looked up and said, "Your shoelace is weird." And that was the most direct connection we had. Then Mallory stood up, dusted off her jeans, and said, "Okay, time to go." I didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded and stood up slowly. As she packed his things, I crouched beside him one more time and whispered, "Maybe I'll see you again sometime, buddy." He didn't respond. But as they walked away, just before they turned the corner, he looked over his shoulder and yelled one word. "Bye, stranger." I stood there frozen. That word again. Stranger. It echoed in my chest like a closing door. I had met my son, and I was nothing more than a visitor in his story. A week passed after that morning in the park. I couldn't stop hearing that word. Stranger. I heard it in my dreams, in the coffee maker's gurgle, in the spaces between thoughts where silence used to live. It wasn't meant to be cruel. He was just a kid calling things what they were. And the truth is, he wasn't wrong. I was a stranger, a ghost that had drifted into his sunny world and left nothing but a shadow on the grass. But even ghosts remember what sunlight feels like. I didn't reach out again right away. I told myself not to push it. Let her breathe. Let him breathe. Let this impossible situation settle into whatever shape it was going to take. I convinced myself that the moment I'd had, those 20 minutes watching him push toy wheels through the dirt, had to be enough. But grief isn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it just sits there in your chest, quiet and heavy, waiting for you to acknowledge it. And then, 4 days later, my phone buzzed. Mallory. One line. Cedar keeps asking when the man with weird shoelaces is coming back. I read it over and over, thinking maybe I was misreading the words. But I wasn't. That was my invitation. Or at least, an opening. So we tried again. Same park, different spot under a different tree. This time, I brought him something. A toy fire truck, bright red with working sirens that probably violated several noise ordinances. He lit up when he saw it. Not for me. And necessarily, but for the fire truck. And that was enough. That was more than enough. What noise do real fire trucks make? He asked, holding it up to examine the tiny ladder. I did this ridiculous, over-the-top siren impression that made me sound like a dying seal. And he laughed so hard he dropped his juice box on the grass. That laugh. God, that laugh was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. The second meeting lasted an hour. The third lasted almost 2. By the fourth, he'd started calling me fire truck guy instead of stranger. I took it. I held on to that nickname like it meant something sacred, because in a way, it did. I was no longer just a random person who'd wandered into his story. I was a thing, a part of his vocabulary, his memory, his Saturday routine. That was more than I had any right to expect. Curtis didn't like it. I could see it in his face one day when he came to pick Cedar up from one of our park meetings. We didn't speak. We just nodded at each other, civil and careful, like two men holding opposite ends of a very fragile thread. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, maybe even fear, but I hadn't come for revenge. I didn't want to destroy his role in Cedar's life. I just wanted my own. And surprisingly, Mallory understood that better than I'd expected. She began inviting me to more than just park benches, play dates at indoor playgrounds, story time at the library, a trip to the science museum where Cedar discovered that he loved rockets and hated the planetarium because it was too dark. Every week, I learned something new about him. He liked ketchup on everything, even ice cream. He hated loud toilets and would make me carry him past the hand dryers in public bathrooms. He loved bubble wrap more than any actual toy I could buy him. Every week, I fell a little deeper into the terrifying joy of being his something. Not his dad, not yet, but something more than a stranger. And every week, I feared it would all get taken away. But it didn't. It kept growing, slowly, unevenly, like something planted too late in the season but determined to bloom anyway. One afternoon, we were sitting on the floor of a bookstore, flipping through a picture book about sea turtles. He was leaning against my arm, completely absorbed in a page about turtle eggs hatching on a beach, when he said something that stopped my heart. "You feel like a dad." He said it so quietly, so matter-of-factly, without even looking up from the book, like he was commenting on the weather or asking for a snack. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. My throat had closed completely. My heart felt like it was trying to climb out of my chest. I blinked too fast and hoped he didn't notice the way my hands were shaking. But he did notice. "Are you crying?" he asked, finally looking up at me with those impossibly blue eyes. No," I managed, coughing to clear my voice. "I'm just allergic to turtle books." He laughed, shook his head like I was the most ridiculous person he'd ever met. And then he went back to reading like nothing earth-shattering had just happened. But something had shifted. That single sentence, "You feel like a dad," had stitched together something inside me that I thought would always stay torn. We're still figuring it out. There's no rulebook for this kind of thing. No manual that explains how to build a relationship with the child you never knew you had, while navigating the feelings of the woman who kept him from you, and the man who's been raising him as his own. I don't know what to call our arrangement. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Curtis will ever stop looking at me like I'm a time bomb waiting to explode their carefully constructed life. But I know this: I'm not a stranger anymore. Now, when Cedar sees me walking up the sidewalk to meet them at the park, he doesn't say stranger. He doesn't even say fire truck guy anymore. He runs at me full speed, arms wide, shouting something else entirely. "Daddy!" And every single time I catch him, every single time I lift him up and spin him around while he giggles like the world is made of pure joy, I remember what it feels like to be whole. It's not perfect. Nothing about this situation is perfect. Mallory still carries guilt that shows up in the way she watches us together, like she's waiting for me to demand some kind of payment for the years I lost. Curtis still struggles with sharing the title he thought was his alone, though he's trying harder than I ever expected him to. And me? I'm learning how to be a father to a child who already has a life, a routine, a world that existed long before I showed up with my DNA results and my desperate need to belong somewhere. But Cedar doesn't see the complications. He doesn't understand the adult mess that brought us to this point. He just knows that now he has 2 dads instead of 1, and in his 3-year-old logic, that's actually pretty cool. Last week, he asked me if I wanted to see his room. His actual room. In the house where he lives with Mallory and Curtis. It was the first time I'd been invited inside their world, beyond park benches and public spaces. Curtis answered the door, looked at Cedar bouncing excitedly beside me, looked at Mallory standing behind them, and then, after what felt like the longest pause in human history, he stepped aside. "Come on in," he said quietly. "He's been talking about showing you his dinosaur collection all week." Cedar's room was exactly what you'd expect from a 3-year-old. Toys everywhere. Books scattered across the floor. A bed that looked like it had been jumped on recently. And on his dresser, carefully arranged like precious artifacts, was a collection of tiny plastic dinosaurs. "This one's a T-Rex," he explained solemnly, holding up a green figure with tiny arms. "And this one's a... what's the long neck one called?" "Brontosaurus," I said. "Brontosaurus," he repeated carefully, like he was memorizing it for a test. And then he did something that nearly broke me. He picked up a small red fire truck from the collection, the one I'd given him months ago, and handed it to me. "This one's my favorite," he said, "because it came from you." I sat down on his tiny bed, holding that fire truck, trying not to cry in front of a 3-year-old who didn't understand why adults leaked water from their eyes sometimes. "I'm glad," I managed to say. He climbed up beside me, and Shrami leaned his small warm body against my arm and said, "Are you going to keep coming to see me?" The question was simple. The answer was everything. "As long as you want me to, buddy. As long as you want me to." It's been 8 months now since that day in the mall, when I saw a yellow stroller and a sleeping baby and thought my story was over. 8 months since Mallory looked at me like I was a ghost she couldn't quite shake. I'm writing this from my new apartment, the one that's big enough for overnight visits. Cedar's toothbrush sits in a cup next to mine in the bathroom. His favorite cereal fills half a cabinet in my kitchen. There's a car seat in my back seat and toys scattered across my living room floor. The custody arrangement is informal, which drives my lawyer crazy, but it works for us. Cedar spends weekends with me sometimes. Wednesday evenings when Curtis has to work late. Random afternoons when Mallory needs to run errands and doesn't want to drag a 3-year-old through Target. We're learning how to be something. Not a family in the traditional sense, but not strangers either. Something new. Something that doesn't have a name yet but feels right when we're all together watching Cedar build elaborate structures with blocks and knock them down with dinosaurs. Curtis and I will never be friends. We're too much history wrapped up in too much hurt for that. But we've found a way to exist in the same space without the world ending. We've learned to share birthday parties and Christmas mornings, and the complicated joy of watching the same small person grow up. Sometimes, late at night when Cedar is asleep in his room and the house is quiet, I think about the man I was before I knew he existed. The one who thought his story ended in a mall food court with a woman who couldn't even say his name. That man was so focused on what he'd lost, he almost missed what he'd found. Last month, Cedar started asking questions about why he has two dads when other kids only have one. Mallory and I sat him down and tried to explain it in 3-year-old terms. We told him that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. That sometimes families get rearranged. That love doesn't always follow the rules we think it should. He listened very seriously, nodding like he understood the weight of what we were telling him. And then he asked the most important question of all. "But you're both staying, right? Both my dads?" "Yes," I said, looking at Curtis across the room. "We're both staying. The truth is, I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this arrangement will hold as Cedar gets older and starts asking harder questions. I don't know if Curtis will always be okay sharing the title he earned through sleepless nights and fevered foreheads and all the small daily acts of love that make someone a parent. I don't know if Mallory will ever stop carrying the guilt of those lost years around like a weight in her chest. But I know this: I am not a stranger anymore. I am Cedar's dad. One of two, which makes our family bigger than most, not smaller. I am the one he runs to when he sees fire trucks on the street. I am the one who knows that he likes his sandwiches cut into triangles and his stories read twice before bedtime. I am the one who gets to catch him when he jumps off playground equipment that's probably too high for a 3-year-old. I am the one who gets to answer his endless questions about why the sky is blue and where dinosaurs went and whether fish get thirsty. I am the one who gets to love him, out loud, without apologizing for it. Yesterday, we were at the park again, the same one where he first called me stranger. He was on the swings, pumping his little legs and shrieking with laughter every time he went higher than he thought he could. "Push me, Daddy," he called out. "Push me higher." And I did. I pushed him toward the sky, toward the clouds, toward whatever future we're all building together. One uncertain day at a time. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with justice. Some end with people getting exactly what they deserve. This one ends with something rarer: grace. Messy, imperfect, complicated grace. The kind that lets you catch a 3-year-old who's flying through the air, trusting completely that you'll be there when he comes back down. The kind that turns strangers into fathers, and fathers into the kind of men who know that love, real love, is big enough to hold more than one truth at the same time. The kind that whispers, in a voice that sounds remarkably like a little boy learning to trust the world, "You're staying, right?" And lets you answer, with every broken and mended piece of your heart, "Yes, I'm staying."